Salutare, salutare! Suntem împreună cu Alex de la History Legends și asistăm împreună la dezastrul șocant, de fapt nu șocant, previzibil, da? Denumit contraofensiva ucraineană. Deci nu știu cine le-a făcut ăstora strategia. Eu cred că Marele Licurici este de vină, da? Și tot el este de vină pentru faptul că a presat o națiune care abia se descurca în defensivă să treacă total aiurea la ofensivă, deși multe voci au atras atenția că nu este cazul. Una dintre ele fiind chiar vocea lui Alex. Da? Deci se pare că americanii sunt pe cale să-și încaseze încă o bătaie după multiplele bătăi pe care și le-au încasat în istoria mai mult sau mai puțin recentă pe tot globul pământesc. Da? Deja mi-este frică ca americanii să nu facă cumva un gest disperat și să aplice metoda americană, metoda prin care au învins Japonia. Dar, din fericire pentru globul pământesc, rușii au arsenal nuclear, da? Arsenal nuclear care își îndeplinește sarcina de a intimida astfel de gânduri sau acțiuni nebune. Îi dăm drumul la treabă. Go!
My friends, you are the witness of the offensive of this shattered dream.
Hai să vă arăt ceva. S-a bușit YouTube, da? Încercăm să băgăm varianta traducere automată în limba română. Hai mă cu română, hai! Română, română, română. Unde suntem? Română.
Dreams.
It is far from a failure.
Asta e. Așadar, rămânem doar noi cei care înțelegem limba engleză și derulăm înapoi și în sfârșit tac eu din gură și las pe Alex să vorbească. Go!
My friends, you are the witness of the offensive of this shattered dreams.
It is far from a failure, in my view.
You know,
Ăsta nu-i Miley ăla, a?
when General Milley says that the offensive is far from a failure, he actually means that far from a failure. As you've seen, the facts are hard to ignore, even for the mainstream media.
Ukraine's counter-offensive has struggled to achieve its objectives.
Here from the New York Times, after suffering heavy losses, Ukrainians pause to rethink strategy. I guess this is Russian propaganda. The agents of the Kremlin. Yeah, disclaimer, for legal purposes,
Putin's puppet!
this is a joke. In the article, they say that Ukraine has lost as much as 20% of its weapons and armor meant for the offensive, and the rate dropped as the campaign slowed and commanders shifted tactics. But then they still admit the following. The startling rate of losses dropped to about 10% in the ensuing weeks. So let me get this clear. Ukraine lost 30% of all the military equipment meant for the offensive.
Da? La 10% a ajuns după ce a scăzut de undeva de mai sus. Ia să vedem, ăsta e NAFO bot. Ia hai să vedem ce zice.
Fuck. Oh my god, it's worse than I thought. Our board General Milley also claimed that NATO trained 17 Ukrainian brigades, roughly 63,000 Ukrainian troops for this offensive. If we assume a 30% casualty rate for manpower, that's
Stop! Deci, 30% este un procent de la care orice comandant al unei unități militare își ia jucăriile și pleacă acasă. Deoarece, indiferent dacă pierde sau câștigă, pierderile sunt prea mari și nu justifică nici măcar o eventuală victorie.
That's roughly 19,000 NATO-trained Ukrainian soldiers, KIA, are wounded within a month, plus all the ones that are not NATO-trained, like the...
Păi, cum au spus și rușii, vreo 26.000 de victime KIA. Deci, căzuți definitiv pe câmpul de luptă. Uite, aici avem cifra de 19.000. Dar probabil că cei 19.000 sunt de fapt doar cei antrenați de către instructorii NATO, ori mai fi și din cei antrenați de sovieticii ucraineni.
The mobilized personnel and the territorial defense forces. In the end, it's not very far from Russian estimates, which claim 26 to 28,000 Ukrainian casualties since the start of the offensive. It took 6 months of preparation for this offensive in terms of weapons delivery and training. Results, massive casualties and a massive flop. Zaluzhny, give me back my...
Vai. Deci, asta este o poză emblematică a situației nasoale în care se găsește Ucraina și ultimul pe listă cu voia dumneavoastră, Nea Zelenski. Da, îl vedeți aici la summitul NATO de la Vilnius, nebăgat în seamă de nimeni și uitându-se în obiectivul camerei ca o mida la perdea.
My brigades! According to this post, Ukraine still has 8 fresh brigades left. Now the big dilemma for Ukraine is what to do with the remaining reserves. Double down on the Zaporozhye front or send them north to stop the Russian offensive said to amount to 100,000 soldiers and 900 tanks. Fun fact, this is exactly what happened during the Battle of Kursk. It's not as if there were no warning signs. Remember this video I posted on March 28, 2023. Ukraine's spring offensive might run into a wall. Then on June 1st, just a couple days before the offensive was launched, I posted this other video. Ukraine should cancel its counteroffensive. Welcome.
Deci, cu alte cuvinte, americanii sau cine dictează strategia ucraineană au fost avertizați de un simplu YouTuber, Alex de la History Legends, și mulți alții ca el, că nu este singur, da? Care nu e singurul care ne spune adevărul. La asta se rezumă până la urmă tot. Caută adevărul și ascultă-l, bagă-l în seamă.
Welcome to History Legends. Here are the latest news of the Russo-Ukrainian war. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. As you know, some of my Ukraine videos have been targeted with limited or no ads. So make sure to check out my Patreon or PayPal to keep the show running.
Tot așa și eu mulțumesc celor care îmi susțin eforturile pe Patreon și ca membri ai canalului Noaptea Minții. Vă îndemn să lăsați un like și să vă abonați. Abonatul este gratis. Vă asigur eu că YouTube nu vă afișează videoclipuri în funcție de canalele la care sunteți abonați, ci efectiv observă comportamentul vostru și chiar dacă nu sunteți abonat la un canal, dacă YouTube observă că îl urmăriți în mod constant, vă va sugera videoclipuri de la acel canal în mod constant. Deci abonarea este, dacă vreți, ca un fel de insignă, ca un element de prestigiu al unui canal și eu aș fi onorat să vă am pe dumneavoastră ca abonați.
Thank you to everyone that has already helped and welcome to the headquarters. Our boy Millie also talked about something interesting here.
The Russians have had several months to put in a very complex defense in depth, a linear defense in depth. It's not quite connected trench lines like World War I, but it's not dissimilar from that either.
He's right, as you can see on the map, we're not talking about one continuous set of trenches all along the front like during World War I, but a series of small outposts which the Ukrainians are fighting extremely hard for. In this article from the Times, Ukrainian counteroffensive, we take their trenches, but they take them back. They interviewed one infantry officer and he said, "We were held up for 2 weeks by this one outpost. At this point, Ukrainian assault brigades lost 30% of their..."
Iarăși 30% pierderi. Iar trebuie cineva să le spună să se oprească.
Strength. And they only started nibbling at Russia's main line of defense, namely in this sector, where they are approaching the strategic village of Robotine. But again, at what cost? On July 11th, Ukraine went through another tank graveyard. Once again, the flagship unit of the Ukrainian army, the 47th Mechanized Brigade, took the bulk of the casualties. In this picture, we can see a dozen American M2 Bradley IVs, M113 APCs, and tanks destroyed or damaged, all in one day. And this is only drone footage released to the public. In this video, you can see how 6 Bradleys were destroyed by a combination of mines and artillery strikes. If we do some geolocation work, here's the road that bends and here's the forest belt. And if we look on the map, we notice that this column of Bradleys was destroyed along this road towards the village of Robotine. In this picture, you can see the losses and their position a bit more clearly. Using this other map, we noticed that their goal was to storm this set of trenches positioned along the road. These are important because this is the first set of fortifications from Russia's main line of defense. Ukrainian infantry creep their way to this area and then swarm the enemy trench
Creep their way. Deci, ofensiva furișată. Hai să
from
vedem.
all directions. Noticing the lack of reaction of Russian artillery, they called for the second wave to continue the assault using the Bradleys and other armored vehicles to storm the village of Robotine. The plan was almost perfect. Had the Ukrainians captured the village right after, this could have been the breakthrough they had waited for so long.
Deci, asta este pe sistemul când ofensiva merge prea bine, înseamnă că de fapt intri într-o capcană. Ia hai să vedem.
But this is when the Russians closed their trap. They got stopped by camouflaged Russian positions in the forest belt right behind. Russian howitzers shelled the entire area, and using the high ground, we can suppose that hidden ATGM crews ambushed Ukrainian vehicles almost at point blank. In this image, you can see Ukrainian infantrymen disembarking from a Bradley, and then a moment later, the vehicle gets hit. The soldiers are now left in the open at the mercy of the enemy. Here you can see the smoking column from the perspective of the Russian troops of the 42nd Motorized Rifle Division. And while trying to escape from the ambush, this fleeing Bradley got hit by an FPV drone. Reports then mention that the Russians bombarded the entire column and all the infantry scattered around the fields with TOS flamethrowers. And with these images, you can get an idea of the extent of the damage done with such strikes. Oryx now reported as many as 35 M2 Bradleys, models ODS SA, visually confirmed losses.
Bradley left the chat.
During this attack, 2 Leopard 2s were also reported as destroyed or damaged. I know the image quality is extremely bad, but allegedly we're talking about 1 Leopard 2A6 minesweeping tank, as well as an extremely valuable Leopard 2R mine-clearing tank. That could mean that the 47th Brigade lost roughly 35 to perhaps 50% of the Bradleys they received. And that's just in equipment. Can you imagine the extent of losses of their assault units? As an example, in the 2nd Battalion of the 33rd Mechanized Brigade, it was reported that the official number of KIAs was 162 men since June 8th. If we include wounded personnel, we could be looking at over 60% casualties.
De ce vorbeam noi de 30%? Uite-i pe unii sărmanii cu pierderi de peste 60%.
For this assault unit alone, and to replenish their mountain.
Aha, și acum și cu scenele astea, demonetizarea clipului e ca și garantat. Da? Vedeți aici, în căutare de eroi putem denumi scena asta. Da?
In losses, Ukraine is still carrying a series of mobilization campaigns. That's when the chief sergeant of the 47th Mechanized Brigade, Valery Marcos, had enough. Enough of this slaughter of this brigade he worked so hard to build. On social media, he wrote, "I categorically disagree with the decisions regarding the use and development of the 47th Brigade." And here's a translation of his letter.
Păi stai să punem pauză să vedem ce a zis omul. Da? Se pare că nu a fost lăsat să construiască o unitate militară conform cu valorile, da, la care au aderat când au început înființarea ei, da? Și nu mai are oportunitatea și nici nu mai poate influența corectarea situației dezastroase, se subînțelege, și că nu se mai consideră șeful sau sergentul acestei brigade și că își dorește cea mai joasă poziție în cadrul brigăzii, astfel încât să rămână totuși alături de camarazii săi pe câmpul de luptă, un om dintr-o bucată.
Development of the 47th Brigade. And here's a translation of his letter of resignation. Take a look at what he wrote.
Yeah.
He spoke of the incompetence of the senior officers. I ask you to transfer me, Chief Sergeant Marcus Valieri, to the lower position of Combat Commander, the Deputy Commander of Military Unit A4699. Major Ivan Chalamaha is an immoral degenerate.
Oh.
Being in the same team with him humiliates my honor and dignity.
No.
And according to the latest news on July 20, the Ukrainian 47th Brigade launched another attack against Robotine, but this time at night along the main road.
Bă, nene, nu și-au învățat lecția. Pe bune acum. Da? Știți definiția nebuniei. Să continui să întreprinzi mereu aceleași acțiuni sperând la rezultate diferite.
Reportedly, the assault was stopped, and the Ukrainians abandoned 6 armored vehicles behind.
Aha.
But who can blame Valery Marcos? When we see articles like this one from the Washington Post, Ukraine aims to sap Russian defenses as US urges for decisive breakthrough.
Deci, cine a împins în necaz? Cine? Statele Unite ale Americii. Da? Păi să se ducă atunci pe câmpul de luptă și că hai să-i mai scutească pe bieții oameni. Totuși, zic. Ha?
That means Ukrainians have to keep attacking no matter the cost.
Hai bă, Alex, că nu mai e loc de glumă. Pe bune acum. Da? Ce aici? Încă un cimitir de blindate. Ia uite aici s-au încurcat unii în alții pe acolo.
And now it seems that even the Ukrainian General Staff has acknowledged the defeat on the Zaporozhye front, and they're slowly moving their focus now towards Bakhmut once again. However, it is important to note
Toate drumurile duc la Bakhmut, nu la Roma.
the excellent work of Ukrainian counter-battery fire. Like in this video, where Ukrainians reportedly destroyed 3 field guns, an ammo supply vehicle, and an ammo field storage site. This is what Major General...
Deci, good job. Și aici vreau să vă spun eu o chestie. Considerându-mă pus la punct, da, cu teoria, să spun așa, cu politica externă în mare, da, cu situația din Ucraina, am început și eu să urmăresc la firul ierbii evenimentele. Adică să-i urmăresc pe vloggerii de război care prezintă zilnic sau chiar de mai multe ori pe zi desfășurarea luptelor pe întreaga linie a frontului. Da? Și acum să nu credeți că pur și simplu peste tot rușii înving. Nu. Uneori au ucraineni acțiuni de succes, alteori au dezastre. Chestia este că în mare ucrainenii au mult mai multe dezastre decât acțiuni de succes. Ocazie cu care mi-am dat seama cum fac vloggerii de război gen Hosu, da? De prezintă din postare în postare numai victorie după victorie după victorie, da? Ucraineană și cumva per total, nu știu cum se face, dar rușii din înfrângere în înfrângere au luat aproximativ 20% din suprafața Ucrainei. Simplu. Efectiv, ei prezintă doar momentele în care ucrainenii au succes, da? Și ignoră restul dezastrelor. Asta e strategia. Da? Recent chiar am văzut și un canal din Republica Moldova, bă, care-i tot așa, mă, nene, mă, victorie, 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 victorie și săraca Ucraina, de fapt, sângerează. Rușine manipulatorilor, rușine.
Ivan Popov, commander of the 58th Army, complained about in his report. His troops faced a lack of artillery, reconnaissance, and counter-battery stations. And as you can see, it caused unnecessary losses in Russian artillery units. Here's another example. You can see how a Ukrainian drone detected a Russian column of 4 D-30 towed howitzers on the move when they're at their most vulnerable.
No,
They were then swiftly annihilated by very accurate fire. And on this video, you can see the aftermath of this Ukrainian artillery strike. To be honest, not much is left of this Russian column.
Clar.
Major General Popov also said that Russian units of the 58th Army needed rotation, that they're exhausted, and that they will soon break if nothing is
Sfântul
done.
Gheorghe.
How do you think the Russians solved this problem? Did they send reinforcements? Shortly after speaking up
L-au
about
dat afară, l-au dat afară. Nu, n-am văzut clipul. Vă spun eu că l-au dat pe ăsta afară.
these problems, Major General Ivan Popov resigned as commander of the 58th Army
poftim.
and voluntarily transferred to a command
okay.
post in Syria. Once again, at the same time,
S-a dus în Siria să se facă util pe acolo. Da, ce să spun.
we could be witnessing high-level maskirovka from the Russian side
Sau
to
așa.
fake being weak on this part of the front, just to bait the Ukrainians for yet another attack, to really crush down the remaining reserves of the Ukrainian army,
Posibil și asta.
especially since Ukrainian reserves equipped with Marder, IFVs, Strikers, or Challenger 2s have yet to be used on the
Yeah.
battlefield. Because let's be honest, these assaults take a heavy
Chiar când vedem și noi tancurile britanice în acțiune, a?
toll on Ukrainian forces. Most of the time, the infantry are just pawns that wait for
Oh,
Russian artillery to unleash a storm of steel,
Aoleu, ce e acum?
like these 7 Ukrainian soldiers taking cover in a crater, scared, and literally all on top of each other. Not only that, once the Ukrainians secure a Russian trench network, the Russians already have the exact coordinates of their own trenches.
Bă,
So the
așa
moment
ceva.
these positions are conquered, they can
Deci nu m-aș fi gândit, dacă nu vă concentrați, cumva, vă spun eu pe românește, o strategie, da? Deci rușii, când sunt în apărare și nu mai fac față presiunii ucrainene, își iau tălpășița, părăsesc tranșeele, ucrainenii se bagă bucuroși în tranșee și mulțumesc frumos, da? Numai că, ce să vezi, artileria rusă are deja setate coordonatele respectivelor tranșee și bieții ucraineni pățesc complicat.
and fire shells right into it with extreme precision. This is how this Irish volunteer described attacking enemy trenches to Sky News.
Zero on, it's horror.
Horror.
It's horror. It's
Horror.
slaughter. Trained soldiers.
Aoleo, e horror. Au venit rușii cu lopețile ruginite și...
Just left there. Just left there. And I don't know why.
Because of their professionalism and combat experience, foreign volunteers are often used during these assaults. Like these Colombian fighters you can see on screen doing a quick prayer before storming Russian trenches. But just like the Irish mercenaries said, most of the attacks turn to... Meanwhile, this Colombian volunteer, 31-year-old Steven Quintero, attached to the 59th Brigade, told the following story to double your radio.
Ia să vedem.
You only have 10 to 20 minutes to secure enemy positions, or the reinforcements will kick you out. He also said, turns out that the fight with the Russians is to sit in a hole and pray that the shell does not fly directly to your head. The only positive side effect for Ukraine of this continuous shelling
Yeah,
is that
shit.
over time Russian artillery render their own positions unsuitable for defense. After
Aoleu, incredibil. Deci, singurul câștig al ucrainenilor este că după ce rușii își părăsesc pozițiile, le lasă să fie ocupate 10-20 de minute de ucraineni sau de mercenari, pe urmă rușii își bombardează propriile poziții, de data asta ocupate de inamic, și în felul ăsta provoacă stricăciuni, tranșeelor. Hai, lasă-o încolo, dacă și asta e pierdere. Lasă, Alex, că sapă e altele.
which the Russians have no other choice but to withdraw to better positions. But as you've seen, it's very brute force and it comes at the cost of a high body count. Another interesting thing this Irish volunteer described is the aggressivity of Russian tanks.
We were told there's a Russian trench line, and our job is to go into the trenches and clear them out, hold them until auxiliary units come, and then we go.
They were taken to a staging area.
Deci, ei ocupă tranșeele, așteaptă întăririle și, pe urmă, pleacă din zonă și îi lasă pe ea în tranșee. Să discute cu artileria rusă.
In the distance, another tank approached the unit, assuming it was friendly,
Yeah, I'm good.
but it wasn't.
Now we have the tank literally coming out, starting to chase us. And that's terrifying. When you see a
Un T-72, dacă am reținut corect.
big T-72 coming for you and you're in a Humvee pickup, yeah, it's like a hot knife through butter. You're finished. So again, all of us are screaming, try the Humvee. I was going,
Go!
Something very similar happened a couple weeks ago on the Vremievsky salient. We can
Da, deci o lopată ruginită de T-72 l-a trimis pe voluntarul ce era ăsta, britanic sau irlandez, ok, irlandez, l-au trimis la gară, da? Și pe urmă, hai, acasă, că ne-am săturat de rușește.
see dozens of armored vehicles filled with Ukrainian Marines rushing towards an enemy trench line located along this tree line. Unbeknown to them, a Russian tank was hiding on the
Stați să mă asigur că nu acopăr puțin, da? Deci unde sunt steagurile? Sunt două blindate ucrainene care nu observă tancul rusesc pitit după pâlcul de copaci.
other side of the tree line, waiting like a shark. That clearly means they attacked without visual surveillance from friendly drones. And this is when the Russian tank started picking off the armored vehicles one by one
No.
from their exposed flanks, firing across the trees. This firefight forced the Ukrainians to quickly pull back. They could not even see what was happening. Of course, these aggressive tactics are not without a risk. In order to avoid detection, Russian tanks are often on their own and can themselves become a prey thereafter, like this burning Russian T-72B3 just outside of Robotine going back to friendly lines. However, the big difference between Russia and Ukraine is that the Russians have full control over their line of production and they keep sending train after train of T-90Ms or T-72Bs to the front. And this batch was even blessed by an Orthodox priest
Extra armură de la Doamne, tare!
for extra protection. While Ukrainian assaults near Robotine were faltering, they did not get much more luck near Pyatikhatki on the west side of the front. Here you can see another armored column that got destroyed a couple days ago. On July 13th, some infantry was sent forward along the T-08-12 road from Pyatikhatki to Zherebryanka. We can see a platoon-sized unit of the Volunteer Reconnaissance Battalion, Sonechko, spread out along both sides of this dirt road. Using the map and geolocation, we can see how they were halted 300 meters east of the village once the tree line stopped, as they were spotted by enemy aviation and artillery fire started to zero them in, after which they withdrew with no apparent losses. Meanwhile, other infantry columns were not so lucky. In a very similar scenario, this one was also detected, but a direct strike on their formation left 2 KIAs. This unit was geolocated on this road going to Pyatikhatki, a couple hundred meters away from the recon unit. Usually after such reconnaissance and force missions, the main assaults take place. In this video, you can see about 2 squads worth of soldiers trying to push along this tree line. However, they're spotted by an accurate artillery fire, although it slowly closes in on them. Eventually, they pick up their wounded and run away. And then the second wave has to walk through the failed attempt of the first wave. Right now, the only place where the Ukrainians can still achieve some tactical success is in the Vremievsky salient on the east side of the front. On the 14th of July, Ukrainians launched an offensive against the villages of Staromayorsky and Urzhainoye along
Mamă, ce denumire complicate au. Bă, dar îți dezmeardă urechea, efectiv.
the Mokrayali River with the 35th Marine and 31st Mechanized Brigades under intense enemy fire. By the 17th of July, Ukrainian armored vehicles reached Staromayorsky, with infantry even setting foot in the northern part of the village. Here you can see a group of Ukrainian soldiers dropping off their wounded inside a BMP. Shortly after, their assembly area in the forest belt was spotted by enemy artillery. Meanwhile, in this video, a Ukrainian BMP rotating out as they pass by 2 destroyed Mastiffs and 1 KIP armored personnel carrier. Here another unit got hit. 2 MRAPs and 1 M113 gone. These 2 positions are the gates in the direction of Staromlinovka, a strategic logistical hub for Russia in the sector. This is why the Russians immediately counterattacked and by July 18th regained control of most of Staromayorsky. Mili also mentioned the problem of minefields.
And they are slowly and deliberately and steadily working their way through all these minefields. And it's a tough fight. It's a very difficult fight.
Followed by this article from July 15th from the Washington Post. Minefields are biggest obstacles to Ukrainian counteroffensive. All this is essentially a summary of this video I posted on July 7th. Oh, I almost forgot, talking about minefields. Regarding the Leopard 2s, there was a whole debate in the past few months about Ukrainian tank crews getting training, NATO training in Germany. At one point, Ukrainians asked their German instructors a very important question: what to do about the minefields? And this is what the Germans said.
Yeah.
Wir hatten gemeinsame Übungen und da haben wir die Deutschen dann gefragt, wie geht ihr denn durch ein Minenfeld? Und sie sagten uns, wir fahren drumherum. Auf ihren Karten ist ein Minenfeld halt 200 mal 100 Meter.
Deci le-a spus să ocolească câmpurile de mine. Ia să vedem ce le mai zice.
Größe. Aber das gibt's hier nicht. Hier reden wir von Hektar um Hektar. Es ist viel schwerer hier. Die Taktik muss angepasst werden.
This is where I have to present you Viktor, a 52-year-old sapper attached to the Ukrainian 35th Marine Brigade. The men under his command call him grandfather because of his gray beard. 3 days after the Russian invasion on February 27, 2022, he volunteered for the Ukrainian army without telling his wife or his daughters. And that's how he entered the ranks of the military once again, 30 years after completing his military service as a sapper. Now he says he fights for his grandchildren, and his job is to open pathways across minefields. He said, "We hardly use minesweepers because the ground where we have to work is simply filled with projectile fragments. This is an unnecessary waste of time and nerves." If you're an army sapper, let me know in the comment section if what he says next makes sense.
Yeah.
We mostly have to perform tasks in a limited time interval, making passages for further assault and reconnaissance actions of infantrymen. Therefore, our main tool is a special metal probe, with which we pierce the soil in order to detect mines by contact method. Accordingly, we do not use special equipment for demining, because under enemy fire it can easily turn into a pile of scrap metal. Very, very interesting. Goes to show the limitations of military equipment and the importance of training, specialized training, the lack of significant results on the Zaporozhye front, and the overall failure of the counteroffensive forced Ukrainian authorities to react, hence the strike on the Crimean Bridge. That's all.
That's all. Ne-a plăcut, Alex. În continuare, vă mulțumesc pentru că ați urmărit videoclipul până la capăt. Nu uitați de like, nu uitați de subscribe și vă aștept la comentarii. Haide!